First up is the remake of Lilo and Stitch, and just to set the scene a little bit, so I definitely saw the first one. I think I even saw it while I was in Hawaii. The animated film is from Chris Sanders and Dean DeBlois, who I think are a very creative duo together. You know, they are the team who eventually went on to make How to Train Your Dragon, and I recall coming out of the theater and going, okay, that was very cute. This is not one of those films that I have a super nostalgic obsession with. I know that it holds that place in many a person's heart, and I love that for them. You know, I like that it was an original film. You know, I like that it was creative. I like that it had diverse protagonists, and the voice cast we'll put an asterisk on. But, you know, overall, I had a generally positive recollection of the first Lilo and Stitch, but I did not rewatch it going into this one because it had been so long since I'd seen it, and I went, you know what, let me just give this a chance on its own. And the good and the bad thing is, this movie is good because the source material is good. I don't think this necessarily does anything to majorly improve upon the core story of Lilo and Stitch, which, if you are unfamiliar, it is about Stitch, which is an alien, vicious experiment in a cute, adorable body that gets sent to Earth, and then fate brings him together with this little girl, Lilo, who she and her family, and most importantly, her older sister, are going through some tough times. Their parents have passed. None of this is major spoilers. Also, the film is 20 plus years old. You probably know it if you're listening to this. So, anyway, I think this film is good because the source material is good. The good news is they didn't mess it up. I think they absolutely ran the risk of doing that, and that is something that I have felt they have done with some of their other adaptations and remakes. Did we need a remake of this? I don't think so. I begrudge it, I will say, the least out of all of them, because they did cast actual people of color in this one, and I know there is a discussion about colorism and also, indigenous Hawaiian versus kind of like born on Hawaii and maybe of AAPI culture, but not necessarily indigenous Hawaiian, and we won't get into that. Let's just talk about it as a film. I like that at least of the remakes, it is putting a diverse cast at the forefront. I think the animation for Stitch is fine and cute, and it translates pretty well into this sort of like live action hybrid format. I think Maya Kealoha, who plays live action Lilo, is an adorable star. There's no disputing her magnetism on screen. She's very charming. This is directed by Dean Fleischer Camp, who did Marcel the Shell, which I think is a brilliant animated film, and that one made me cry. This one made me tear up a little bit. I'll give it that. I think part of the reason that the original material grates against me a little bit is that I have always identified with the older sister character, Nani, who I am an older sister, and she is stressed out by her younger sibling and then equally stressed out by this chaotic creature that comes into her life. And I find Stitch's antics not necessarily always adorable. This is a me issue that I probably need to dive deeper into, but I definitely felt the same feelings of frustration when I saw the antics of, Lilo and Stitch, and then felt myself in the position of the older sibling being like, can you just stop? Can you just chill out for a bit? But that is just a me and the source material thing. I think this does a pretty good job of adapting it. Again, they didn't mess it up. I really enjoyed Billy Magnuson and Zach Galifianakis as Jumbo and Pleakley, who are two of the aliens sent to retrieve Stitch. The physical comedy there, I think, worked really, really well. There are some changes between this and the original one, particularly in regards to the ending. I didn't have a problem with them. I thought they were fine. I thought they made sense for coming out 20 plus years later, and given the characters that they've got and having it be, set in the real world versus the ability to separate a little bit with it being animated. I didn't bump up against the changes. I think purists might a little bit, but this is also one of those scenarios where I go, maybe we get over it a little bit, So do I think we need this film? No, I do not. I think you could totally watch the original one and get the same dopamine hit as you would from watching this. Do I think this is going to be a huge hit this summer? Absolutely. And if you're in a scenario where, your kids love the original, or you as an adult love the original, and you want to see this, I'm not saying don't go see it, but if I were to be put in a position where I was like, hey, you can only recommend one iteration of this, I would still pick the original animated film. But I do think the charming nature of the cast is something that sets this apart from the reduce, reuse, recycle other ones. So I will give credit where credit is due there. I definitely laughed during it, and I'm pretty sure I laughed at things that were just lifted from the original material. And again, this is one of those movies where it's just like, okay, great, you didn't mess it up. Congratulations. I had a decent time. I laughed. I was moved. It's credit, honestly, to the source material, and then I guess the credit to the current iteration for not messing it up. I'm going to give this a 3.8 out of 5. The next film I have is Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning, or Mission Impossible 8, and while I do keep my reviews spoiler-free, I'm going to give a slight hint at something here. Guess what? The mission is possible because there's no world at this point in which Tom Cruise as Ethan Hunt, or honestly Tom Cruise as any of the recent action roles, or not even that recent, but just any of the action roles he's taken, allows a mission to fail. And so it feels like there are no stakes to these films, and they keep getting more and more bloated and more convoluted. And as an audience member, I just start to check out. Now, I'm not a huge Mission Impossible person to start. I think there have definitely been some highlights in the franchise, but these latest few ones do not feel like that to me. You know, they get convoluted, they get self-important. There is not a need to retcon every single plot line, and yet I feel like they're just grasping at straws, being like, how can we tie this back to something that happened 20 years ago that nobody's going to remember unless they rewatched all the Mission Impossible films recently? It just wasn't for me. But yeah, so Tom Cruise is back as Ethan Hunt. You've also got Haley Atwell, Paul Clementieff, Simon Pegg, and Ving Rhames rejoining. Esai Morales is back. Shea Wiggum's back. This cast is stacked. You know, it's got Angela Bassett, Janet McTeer, Nick Offerman, Holt McCannally. They're joined also by Hannah Waddingham, Katie O'Brien, and Tremel Tillman from Severance. And shout out to Tremel Tillman, who was the best part of this movie, and I feel like also maybe in a different movie than everyone else. But anyway, so this one I thought was going to pick up where the last one left off, which I academically know I've seen, and all I can remember from it is that there's a submarine and an AI. And I thought, cool, we're going to deal with this imminent submarine threat situation. No, we're not. Okay, we're just going to do another, pulling your face off like tangent in order to reintroduce folks. Okay, here we go. I truly think if this film had been 2 hours, it would have been tolerable. And I know these films also center around, like, the big stunt. And I'm putting that in air quotes, right? Jumping off the highest building in the world. Tom Cruise is doing his own stunts. Yeah, we get it. This one, they've shown it in the trailers. It's on the poster. You know, there's an airplane dogfight. But they have lost the ability to edit themselves and know, like, when a big stunt is enhancing a plot and moving things along and exciting to the audience, and when it is just them being impressed with themselves and patting themselves on the back and being like, well, we spent all this time and energy and effort in it, we can't cut a single frame. This film is the most guilty of that, I think, of all the Mission Impossible films. The actual, like, the world is at stake plot is so, I don't even know that it's not even worth describing. I mean, there's like nuclear weapons involved, et cetera, and of course Tom Cruise is the only one who can stop things. They definitely bring things back from other films that I know I have seen, but I do not remember, and I feel like they are trying to wink, nudge at the audience, be like, remember this? And they love cutting in previous footage, but it still doesn't bring up a nostalgia factor when you're shoving it down the audience's throat and being like, hey, remember this? This is important. You go, okay, all right. Like, can we not bring in new importance? Like, not everything in the universe is as tightly connected as Mission Impossible posits. Tom Cruise is an action star. He is a movie star. He is an action star. I cannot contest that. He's not my favorite movie star or action star. I'm getting kind of tired of this. I had hoped that, maybe we would have passed the mantle or done whatever. And if you call something the final reckoning, it implies that there are stakes, but not the case here. Also, I have questions about, are we supposed to have been trying to buy the idea of romantic chemistry between him and Haley Atwell? Because I was not buying it. And I feel like the movie also wasn't sure if they should commit to it, so it keeps cutting away and be like, yes, they are, they aren't, they are, they aren't. Doesn't matter. Also, I'm glad they didn't commit to it because I would have found that disturbing. Like I said, the runtime is the thing that got me on this one. I wouldn't have particularly enjoyed it. I think I could have found it passable if it had clocked in at 2 hours, but by the time the second hour rolled around, I went, how do we have almost an entire another hour here? How have we not addressed all these other things? Why are we going on so many goose chases? It lost any goodwill it had built up, and it had not built up a lot of goodwill. So, if you are a huge fan of the franchise, I know you're going to watch this because you're going to be a completionist, and I don't blame you. I just want you to set your own expectations in terms of the time you'll have. Again, the things that work about these will be some of the stunts to a degree. Like I said, Tremel Tillman, what a great breath of fresh air in this. Simon Pegg is always a fun one, but, there's nothing new here, even though they bring, quote, new things into it each time because it's just so formulaic. If you were someone who was on the fence about it, I know these are meant to be seen on the big screen, like they are designed that way. I don't want to discredit the folks behind the scenes who put a lot of work into that, but I'm also like, they are, the leadership is letting them down in these scenarios. And so I'm like, if you were on the fence, this is one where I say, wait till it comes out on probably Paramount Plus. If you have no interest in the Mission Impossible films and you have not seen them to this point, you're certainly not going to jump in at number 8. So I found myself really bored. I can respect the craftsmanship of it. I know that people were trying. I know that there is a lot of effort that goes into from a lot of invisible departments, and I feel bad that they are going to be the ones who are going to kind of suffer. I still think this is going to make plenty of money, but honestly, if I was down to pick a movie for this weekend, I'd have to lean towards Lilo and Stitch. I'm only going to give this a 2.7 out of 5. The last film I have is also an action-adventure film, although this one went straight to streaming, and I think it was probably the correct decision. It is Fountain of Youth out on Apple TV+. It's directed by Guy Ritchie and also has a pretty impressive cast. It's got John Krasinski, it's got Natalie Portman, Eiza Gonzalez, Donald Gleason, Carmen Ejogo, Stanley Tucci, Laz Alonso, and Ariane Moayed. And yet, even more so, honestly, than Mission Impossible, this really dragged, and I could not get behind it, I do love a good action-adventure film. I thought, honestly, that this was going to maybe be a little bit like a National Treasure, which is campy and ridiculous in a way that I enjoy, and the way that John Krasinski kind of sets it up in the trailers makes me think it's going to be a little more whimsical than it actually turned out to be. I probably should have known because it was Guy Ritchie. I am not a huge Guy Ritchie fan. I am just very upfront about it. I find his work to be derivative of himself. This is not necessarily a classic Guy Ritchie film, but I also don't find him to be successful when he does things that are not his classic style. So I'm like, oh, maybe you should take a break, buddy. Yeah, so it's an action-adventure film, and Natalie Portman and John Krasinski play siblings, and through a set of circumstances, they are searching for the Fountain of Youth. And honestly, if you want to watch a film about searching for the Fountain of Youth or anything similar to that, go ahead and watch Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, because that is 10 billion times better than what this is. In fact, you can tell this went for the playbook of Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. A little bit meets National Treasure because there's a lot of codes and all that stuff, although that, again, is derivative of Indiana Jones. And then a tiny bit of Goonies. And if you do bother to watch this, you'll be going against my advice, but you'll see what the Goonies reference is if you watch it. The thing that this has going for it versus a Mission Impossible is that this I was able to watch in the comfort of my home, so I could pause and walk away for a moment, and I kept going. How was there this amount of time left? Because instead of checking my watch, I could check the little play bar and go, why? How? I like the actors involved. John Krasinski is one of those interesting actors in that he is perfect as Jim on The Office. And then I think there are a couple film roles where I'm like, yeah, okay, this is fine. He has become, much like Tom Cruise, actually, in some senses, just the same version of himself, and I don't feel like he's pushing himself, and he still has the flexibility to branch outside of it, but he is starting to get trapped into this persona, and it's getting a little tiresome, and because it doesn't fit every scenario, and so trying to watch this, and I'm like, you're all in different movies. Natalie Portman is an Oscar winner, and she is doing her best to try and take this seriously, but, she cannot. Oh, man. Yeah, it was bad. The action was not that exciting. The kind of codexy adventure puzzle part of it was also not particularly exciting. I should also say they are stealing from things like the Da Vinci Code. And just because you are technically an original film doesn't make you an original film if you have just stolen tropes from every other person who's done it better. Like, if you're going to steal, you have to improve. That's my thing if you are making a kind of homage, we'll call it. The successful version of something like this is an homage to those classics, and the unsuccessful version is Fountain of Youth. The dialogue in this is so expository. Every conversation is just like info, info, info. We have never talked to another human in our entire lives, but here are info dumps. I don't recommend this film. My parents are some of the audiences I consider when I'm talking about films where I'm like, okay, they used to love going to theaters. The pandemic has made it a little harder for them to a lot harder for them. So it has to be really great. Is it worth me suggesting that they bother to go to a theater for it? And then the second tier of analysis with them is like, okay, they might have access to these streaming services. They don't have a ton to watch. Is it worth me recommending this to them? And even though there is not a ton for them to watch right now, I'm a no on Fountain of Youth. I'm only going to give this a 1.5 out of 5.